Finding Equanimity Amid Uncertainty, which is sponsored by AboutMeditation.com and the One Mind podcast. So I'm Morgan Dix, and I know some of you, and it's great to see you. And today we're talking good to see you. And can you hear me? Can you hear me all right, Jen?
I can.
All right,
yeah.
Good. So everyone, Dr. Wolkin is a New York City-based licensed clinical psychologist, a mindfulness meditation practitioner, writer, speaker, and adjunct professor. She's also a longtime contributor to AboutMeditation.com. I've previously interviewed Jen on the One Mind podcast at least 2 times. So it's really a pleasure and a privilege, Jen, to kick off this series with you.
Thank you, Morgan. It feels so nice to be here and also just feels so right. I really appreciate, I've been having a call to be of service in some way, and then you landed in my inbox, and I'm just so grateful. I've always enjoyed our connection, our conversations.
Likewise. Yeah, and really the genesis for this is Tom Burchard and I. He's my co-founder at About Meditation. We just felt we have to do something in response to this whole situation. Yeah. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much disruption. I think all of us then are impacted by that. We're experiencing fear. We're experiencing anxiety. All the norms are out the window. So Tom and I thought, all right, let's get on some of our expert voices, some of the people we know can really bring some calm and perspective to this moment. So that's why I reached out to you. You were probably one of the first people I thought about for this show. So yeah, all right, well, let's jump right in. I want to just start with some questions, Jen. In your capacity as a mindfulness practitioner and a clinical psychologist, just how do you think meditation and mindfulness can help during this time? And obviously feel free to set some context here. Like, what are you seeing? What are people experiencing right now?
Sure.
What are they talking about? Yeah.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to validate this. This is a hard time for all of us. Doesn't matter if you're a psychotherapist, a meditation practitioner. We've talked about this just before. If you have a rock solid mindfulness practice, this is a hard time, and I want to validate that first and foremost. And it's okay. I want to start by noting the word equanimity. You chose the word equanimity, and I love that. In colloquial psychology, it sort of just means calm, how to maintain a calmness. But if you look further into its Buddhist definition, it's a conscious readiness to, a conscious understanding rather of reality's transience. And I think that's exactly what we're dealing with here is transience, uncertainty. This is a time of uncertainty. Humans don't like uncertainty at baseline in the best of times. And uncertainty can have this way of making us feel out of control. Our brains are more likely to generate thought patterns to try and take control, but then this leads to unhelpful negative thinking like catastrophizing and worst case scenario thinking, which only leads to anxiety, depression, anger. Mindfulness, as defined by Jon Kabat-Zinn, which is, as you know, the definition that I always use and will use in my book, I have used, is a practice that helps us pay attention on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. So for me, my mindfulness practice during this time and what I've been talking about a lot with my clients is helping us ground in the presence as much as possible so that we can decrease our ruminative thoughts, our worst case scenario catastrophic thoughts, which don't serve us. And not only that, we can do that in a gentle way. We can notice where our thoughts go. We can, validate that we might be thinking these thoughts, and then gently bring our minds and our attentions back towards whether it's the breath or to any present moment activity that we're engaging in. And I know that we talked about this a little, but I wanted to bring it up that the question I've been getting from my clients, and it's a great, great question, is, okay, but Jen, Dr. Jen, How can you be in the moment at this time? How could we say just be mindful, right? This is a time when we need to be future oriented in our thinking. We need to be prepared for what we need. And it's an amazing, amazing question. And it's kept me on my toes. And my answer, I think, is that mindfulness doesn't count out this need, right? It is essential to engage in future-oriented thinking that's productive, that's helpful, that can help us prepare and take appropriate action, right? These are the types of thoughts that we need. Mindfulness doesn't count that out. This is helpful thinking that propels us forward. I think the thinking that I'm referring to that mindfulness really can help with is the thinking that's not productive. It's the hamster wheel thinking, the thinking that no matter how many times we think of it, it won't help us take appropriate action. It won't help us be more prepared in this time. It will keep us on the hamster wheel of thoughts and lead to suffering. I know I've been talking a lot. I just want to mention another thing.
Yeah, please.
We've talked a lot about this before, that I like to categorize mindfulness meditation into, kind of three understandings. There's formal practice, being on a cushion, doing breath work. There's informal practice, taking our practice to anything that we're doing, any tasks, whether it's washing dishes, whether it's showering, whether it's walking, whether it's eating. And then there's this third kind of grouping, which I call mindful living. And I think mindful living is an important point to make here. I think together we can understand that mindfulness is more than just paying attention in an open and non-judgmental way. It's about living more fully. It's about standing in our consciousness with the greatest level of appreciation and importance that's possible, right? It's an awareness that we won't live forever, and yet we can maintain an awareness to how beautiful and life can be. Mm-hmm. And it's about noticing, appreciating, being conscious to the world, this earth, and what it needs, which I think is poignant at this time, right? It's about cultivating gratitude for each moment that we experience.
Yes.
Living, which can elevate the being part of human being, and that includes joys and challenges. And the truth is, we can't choose how life unfolds. We could choose to respond to how it unfolds. Mm. And it's not easy. Nothing about this is easy. It's a practice. And although it's difficult, though, we can work on choosing a more mindful lens. The way we show up right now in relationships with more empathy, kindness, care. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to bring that perspective as well.
That's great. I love that. I think I'd love for you to also speak it seemed part of what you're pointing to in terms of this, both the attentive, non-judgmental moment-to-moment awareness, but also in the more panoramic, living your life context, mm-hmm. where you brought up some of these really large macro themes that it can be helpful to bring those in any given moment because they ground us. They remember, or they help remind us, I'm alive right now.
Exactly.
And that's a blessing. That's a treasure. I'd love for you to also speak to this sense that probably a lot of us have had moments during this whole onset of the pandemic, and then the media, and then, the stock market contracting, and all of it kind of, and then the relentless graphs which show the spread of this virus. So obviously we have this evolutionary programming in us, and survival instincts are incredibly strong. So a lot of the anxiety and fear that we're experiencing, we're programmed to respond that way when crisis comes. And I wonder if you could speak to that. Like, I'm sure some people might experience like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this, or I feel ashamed of my fear or my anxiety. But so can you just speak to can you help normalize that for us?
I just took a deep breath because there's so much to say. So I'm just sort of, where do I start? Well, first I'll start by saying, yes, we are programmed. There's an evolutionary privilege that we have, and that is anxiety. So I want to actually normalize anxiety to begin with, right? We are supposed to feel this way in times like this.
Yeah.
And it's all okay. I like to make a distinction between healthy green zone anxiety and unhealthy red zone anxiety. And the way I make that distinction is, right, we're meant to experience anxiety. Anxiety fuels us to prepare, to take appropriate actions. Our bodies go into a heightened state, right? Our stress level, our stress hormones go up. Our brain prepares for this. So the amygdala is sort of firing more, which is the fear center of the brain. And what happens in a healthy sort of like, in the healthy playing out of this is that we heighten our space to this green zone anxiety, and then we come back to baseline, right? And then our bodies sort of even out, right? And that's the way it's worked. So a lot of, just as a little tidbit, a lot of my clients come in asking for anxiety elimination. And to me, the first thing we do then is talk about normalizing anxiety and how we can't live without anxiety.
Right.
So we can't. It's how we've evolved. We've gone from flippers to fins to flippers to feet, whatever it is, that's not my field, but we really can't live without anxiety. It propels us forward. It's why, we study for tests, at least some of us, or we go to work every morning. Right. Okay. That's the healthy green zone anxiety. But what's happening now is that we're not going back to baseline, right? We're in this perpetual super heightened state that doesn't serve us, right? So we go from, okay, I need to take action, green zone anxiety, to feeling helpless and in panic, red zone anxiety. And that's honestly like a trauma response. I truly believe we're in a collective traumatic experience right now. And when this happens, why it's difficult is, it's suffering to be in that red zone anxiety state. And also what happens in the brain is that we lose our sense of our logical higher order thinking. Our prefrontal cortex, which came later on, right, which is younger than our limbic brains. We sort of start to lose that capacity. We go very into limbic mind, which I'll just quickly explain is literally referring to the limbic system, which is the emotional seat of the brain, where the amygdala lies, the fear center. And when that happens, when we're in this red zone heightened state where we can't go regulate and go back to baseline, we lose our capacity for this part of the brain, the frontal cortex, which helps us make good judgments, helps us make decisions in a logical way. I also want to cover what you said about shame. And I'm going to cover this later probably too. But I think one of the things we need to do right now is allow ourselves to feel all the feels. You know me, so you know this by now, but I'll tell everyone. I'm not a not positive person. I don't love toxic positivity. And so the idea of good vibes only, so really just gets on my nerves a little bit as a clinical psychologist.
And as a New Yorker. And as a New Yorker.
I believe in good vibes, but not good vibes only, right? I believe in all the vibes.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's what I want to express. There's like this push, especially now, to stay positive and stay in a good state of mind. And that's very lovely. it's also not real and not healthy. The research over and over and over again suggests that being able to feel the gamut of our emotions, and then of course to move through them, is the biggest thing for our buck. And I think that's, if I had any takeaway, if I wanted to give any takeaway, it would be that. Allow yourself to feel all the feels, move through them without the judgment. It's okay. I'm feeling it too. And the more that we can normalize this and validate this, I think the better off we are. And that's the mindfulness piece, right? That's always going back to the non-judgment. I'm feeling this and it's okay. I just went on and on, but I'll wait for another question, but I'm sure I'll come back to this.
No, I think individually and culturally that seems like the lesson that is in front of us, to deepen and expand and grow through this suffering. I mean, that's obviously always the case with the suffering, and you don't wish that upon yourself or anyone, but it does seem like that seems like what we're being called to respond to. And I love what you said. I especially love the distinction of the green zone, red zone anxiety, and that there's this healthy context of anxiety, and now we're tipping into this traumatic red zone kind of limbic anxiety with the, and then which brings us back to the theme of this workshop, which is equanimity. How do we find equanimity amid uncertainty? And so to that point, it's like, and again, you were speaking to this indirectly in your answers now, but so what kind of measures do you feel people should be taking to manage the stress and anxiety? And I think I heard what you were saying. Part of that is just accept it. Do not push it away. This is part of our mindfulness practice right now, is embrace it. It's part of reality. But how can people stay grounded when the fear takes hold?
So just for a second, I want to just continue with that. There's a concept called radical acceptance used by Marsha Linehan, who is one of the first in the psychology field to bring, of course, John Kabat-Zinn, but she also brought mindfulness to psychological, interventions, specifically known as DBT. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that or not. It doesn't matter.
Yes,
but
yeah.
I think that's important here. It's not an easy thing. Radically accepting the present moment for what it is. That doesn't mean we have to like it. That doesn't mean we roll over and passively resign to whatever we're experiencing, right? That just means that we're literally and completely not resisting what our present reality is, and knowing that we can change it. To resist present moment reality elicits a suffering that is hard to bear. And again, it's a practice. It's not so easy, right? It's not so easy to say, okay, we can't control how life unfolds, but we can control how we perceive or react to it. It's a practice.
Right.
So I just wanted to re-mention that. And then I think more some hands-on things is be very discerning about the media you consume. I think it's important to set boundaries around the media, both what and when. So that means factual information only. I'm finding the World Health Organization my go-to. As a New Yorker, I don't really like to get political on these ever, but Governor Cuomo is really stepping up. I'm finding information by him to be very accurate and disseminated in a very mindful way. So my point is, what are you consuming? Discern myth from fact. Then, when are you consuming it? So I've had clients who, excuse me so much, I just need a quick water.
Sure.
I've had clients, and I've been so blessed to be doing this at this time. I can't even tell you. I've had clients who are literally refreshing their feeds every 5 minutes, and that's not helpful. That's not the helpful productive action I was talking about, right? That's just going to lead us into that red zone anxiety, or maintain that state.
Mm-hmm.
So I urge people to set boundaries. What I'm doing in my home is we can check it for 30 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 times a day, and that's it. And I also want to talk about boundaries, about the way we talk to people about what we're hearing. You know, there's this concept of emotional contagion, which I won't necessarily get into, but you know, fear is actually contagious, literally. We have mirror neurons, right? In the best of times, they help us with empathy. In the worst of times, we have a fear pandemic. And if you need to set boundaries with someone who's texting you every 5 minutes a news update, please do that. Please let them know that thank you so much for wanting me to be informed. This isn't the way for me right now. Thank you so much. And I think that's a tool that we need to use. You know, it sounds maybe so minuscule. It is so important. I've seen it be a game changer. I also urge people to create structure and routine as much as possible, right? At baselines, our brains like a sense of routine. We like order. It helps maintain our sense of perceived control. So of all times, this is time to build in some kind of routine, whether that's going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, whether that's, if you're working from home, using the same spot every time, having your morning coffee, going outside at a certain time. If you have kids, creating like a craft activity, if possible. You know, Morgan, you could speak to this probably, but, you know, making, you know, just routine for you, your family, and your children as much as possible. Of course, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be as easy. To the best of your ability. If you need to change into regular clothing and not stay in pajamas all day, by all means do that. I only change my shirt. I'm wearing my pajama bottoms because that's my own self-care.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do, though, I need to change my shirt. Whatever you need to do that makes you feel good and also creates a sense of routine. I also want to speak about, and please stop me anytime. I just have so many ideas and I want to put them forth, but if you ever want to interject or ask another question, please let me know.
Sure.
I also am a big fan of creative outlets, okay? This can be, I think creative expression connects us back to ourselves. It also allows our mind to feel free in a time that we're feeling very unfree. I mean, New York City was locked down. I don't know where all of you else are from, but we're asked to self-quarantine. That can be very hard and also very triggering. Our minds aren't locked down. Creative expression can expand our imaginations and can elicit that sense of freedom. We can also use it to connect. We can create for people. I think that's something that is really important too. And speaking of that, we talked about this, creating for people. One of my number one tips, we'll say, during this time is being of service, right? At any other time, there's research about this, and I engage in this with my clients who are particularly experiencing depression. And it can also apply to anxiety. How can I get outside myself? That doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid. That doesn't mean that you're not struggling, but how can I get outside myself and create a sense of purpose? Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite logotherapists, and Irvin Yalom, they talk about call to meaning, a sense of meaning. How can we create a sense of meaning for ourselves even in this time? And that might be what we're doing now. I know for me, I needed this. Thank you.
Yeah, me
I
too.
need it to be of service for my own benefit, and humbly I hope that it helps others, but I need it to sort of get outside myself and to give. And I definitely recommend that in any way you can. And if you can monetarily, that might feel good. And if you can't, there are thousands of ways online to do that. Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a believer in God per se to pray. Pray to something greater, pray to something outside yourself. It doesn't have to be formal. I notice that I've been doing that. What I've also been doing is placing my hand on my heart center and literally just closing my eyes in between clients and just telling myself, it's okay, sweetheart. That's a Tara Brockism. It's
Oh, that's
okay, sweetheart.
excellent. Yeah,
It's
that's so good.
okay. No, really just to connect back to ground. And then you asked about grounding. So when we're really in a panic state, right? All of these are good when we have our frontal lobes online. When we're in that red zone panic and it's hard to speak, we're having palpitations, we can use our breath work. There are grounding exercises that I can send you, Morgan, and we can post online.
Perfect.
There's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. Literally what you could do right now is just ground your feet into the floor and feel them there. You could be sitting, you could stand in mountain pose and just feel the connection between you and the earth / hardwood floors and just feel yourself and ground outside of yourself. And I'm happy to go over this exercise and talk more about it maybe at another time. And again, happy to send it your way.
I think that's perfect. I mean, you said a lot, and I think all of that was very valuable. Definitely send it to me, and we'll post it, everybody, for you guys, so you can access it afterwards. But just speaking to grounding for a second, there's so much like in moments like this where what the anxiety and the fear does is it disperses you, right? Your sense of self-organization starts to come apart. And what grounding does, in my experience, is the opposite. It brings you back, consolidates your self-sense, which anxiety and fear have the opposite effect. What I like to do, and a lot of the things you spoke to beautifully, is I want to ground myself through my 5 senses. I want to feel, I want to come back into my body, and then my self-sense. It's almost immediate. It starts to consolidate. And like you said, in terms of breathing, that tends to be always my first step. I just right away, I just come back to my breath, because it's so fundamental. It bypasses your mind, because that's the trigger for the anxiety and the fear. So your breath, as you were talking about, Jen, it bypasses that limbic system and has the opposite effect. It starts to unwind that fight or flight. And I can't tell you how important that has been for me during this whole episode, or this whole kind of time of uncertainty. I'll just focus everything on my breath. I'll slow down, come back into my body. And then, like you said, so one time I had to go into some self-talk and just say, there are lessons here. This is all about love. And that, and it was that one, I had one episode I told Jen about 8 days ago, where everything started to hit at once, and I could feel myself spinning up. And I did what I just talked about. And then very, very quickly, I was just like, oh, I need to respond to people, because if I'm experiencing this, there are a lot of people experiencing this. If I'm just spinning up like this because suddenly I looked at the money disappearing, I was like getting, like you said, someone was sending me, like, I got 5 of these catastrophic maps just coming in, and it all happened at the same time. And I was like, okay, I've got to sort of establish control over my ecosystem here, which is me. It's my mind, it's my body. But starting with the breath, and then for me also, like, movement, Tai Chi, running, these things have been just critical. And then just enjoying time with family. Those have all been powerful kind of
Yeah.
ways to just be grateful for, you know,
Mm.
the gifts that are also
Yeah.
coming out of this time.
And I just want to thank you, Morgan. And I just want to tell people that there's actually scientific evidence that the breath helps invoke the relaxation response. It's not just we're saying to breathe and everything will be okay. It's literally, and you know, Herb Benson talks about this, the breath, low and slow, deep diaphragmatic breathing invokes the vagus nerve, which is our longest nerve in our body, and really is crucial in our mental health and well-being. And breath work like that can change our body and brain such that we are able to leave the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight kind of mechanism, and enter a more parasympathetic state, which is rest and digest, which is relaxation response. So it's scientifically proven also. I think that's also important to just mention, you know, I'm a neuropsychologist, I can't help myself.
Oh yeah.
But what you said, what you said also I was going to recommend too, is that exercise, even if it's doing jumping jacks, even if it's walking in place, continuing to get oxygen to the brain, keeping serotonin levels where they need to be, our endorphin levels, moving, stretching, so important. I also want to mention that as a health psychologist, physical and mental wellness are inextricably intertwined. One of the keys towards keeping our mental health healthy or, you know, taking care of ourselves is by nourishing ourselves physically. And that means taking care of our physical wellness. That means eating well. I talk a lot about the gut-brain connection. That means watching ourselves if we notice that we're stress eating or emotional eating. It's okay, and I understand, and this isn't about shaming. This is just about, you know, trying to choose a more adaptive tool during this time, right? So less sugar, even though it's so easy. I've been doing it myself. It's so easy, but you know, to just, oh, yeah, I don't know, graze on like a cookie, and that's okay. Everything in moderation, but do watch your intake. This isn't a time necessarily to up the sugar intake or, you know, to up the carb intake, which leads to inflammation. It's sort of keep moderation and keep doing what you've been doing. Whole grains, watch your sleep, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can go on forever with this, but.
Cool. All right. So we're kind of getting to the end here. I want to just wrap up with a few things. So second to last question here, what healing thoughts, words, and ideas are really speaking to you personally through this time? Well, I know you're studying poetry too, so I know.
Yes. Maggie Smith, I don't know if you know her poem, Good Bones.
Yeah.
Her poem, Good Bones, by Tupelo Press is really, it's been circulating on social media. She's just a wonderful person. I'd like to call her friend. And she wrote it in, I think, a few years ago, and it's just so profound right now. So Maggie Smith, Good Bones. I know we don't have time to recite it, but if you check that out. And then I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown, of course.
Yeah.
She talks a lot about this pandemic being a massive experiment in collective vulnerability. And we can be our worst selves when we're afraid, or we could be our very best, bravest selves, she says. And, you know, I love what she says is we don't have to be scary when we're scared. And when we're uncertain, of course, our default is self-protection. But we can choose to allow others in. We can choose kindness. I love that. And then there's a quote by Tara Nicole Nelson. I just saw it on social last night, and she wrote, "We're undergoing a collective global reset and a collective global trauma in real time. A sacred pause is in order before you start trying to get a bunch of stuff done. And I thought this was really profound in many ways. I believe in a pause. Viktor Frankl calls it the space between. It's very much part of mindfulness, is to take pause. And I also want to speak to her saying that before you start to try to get a bunch of stuff done. I mean, I've given you lists of things that you can do here and talked about a lot. And ultimately, the number one thing is be gentle, be gentle, be gentle. You don't have to have a productive pandemic. You don't have to do this and do that. All you need to do is take care of yourself and show up with mindfulness and grace and kindness. And that's okay.
That's awesome.
How about you?
Oh, for me? Well, I think what I mentioned before, I haven't done Tai Chi in years. And then suddenly me and my wife and my daughter watched Kung Fu Panda 4. And, you know, we loved it, but, you know, it's all about Chi.
Yeah.
And then, so the next day I woke up, I was like, it's been, you know, I've got to get back into my Tai Chi. And it was just spontaneous. I just started doing the motions and the forms, and it brought me so much peace, and just boom, it expanded my awareness right away to the life force. I was outside, and suddenly it was just the birds were inside of me. Everything was inside of me. There was no boundaries. And that for me has been a godsend, because then once that's activated, it's just a few motions of my hands. It's just a sway in the hips where I suddenly feel that reconnection to the life force. And that, again, it goes back to grounding. Like, they can be such simple things, such simple movements, motions, inward, outward. But simplicity, which you're pointing to, I feel is really the hallmark of what we all need to embrace.
Yeah. Compassion, gentleness, above all the things.
So let's finish up, Jen, with one question. Everyone, if we had more time, I would open it for Q&A, but we had this question come in before the show, and I wanted to address it to Jen. And here we go. As someone who already suffers from anxiety and depression, I am really having a very, very difficult time with being on lockdown. I'm having long crying spells and feeling excruciating social isolation. The virtual stuff just doesn't really work for me, as opposed to people-to-people contact, which I can relate to that. What kind of advice do you have for people that have mental illness and dealing with this situation?
Yeah. It's a hard question and a great question, and I'm so glad it was asked. And sending all my love to the person who asked this and anyone else struggling at this time. My first answer would be to have awareness and acknowledgement that you're struggling. So awareness and acknowledgement without judgment. I'm struggling, and it's okay. Let yourself feel without shaming yourself. That's first and foremost. And then what I would say is maintain all regimens you were usually doing for mental health care. Sometimes in crisis, we let things go, and we really can't. We have to be vigilant. If you're taking medications, continue to take them. If you have a therapist, connect virtually. Keep your sessions, which I'm doing with my clients, weekly sessions, or if not more. If you don't have a therapist, a lot of therapists are opening up their practices to new clients, even virtually. And then I would say that even though we don't love virtual connection, it's not ideal. Push, behaviorally activate to do it anyway. We need to be in connection right now. We need to be in community. We need to connect ourselves with others, and then maintain that balance between connecting with others and then finding the time that you need for you. But again, I know it's difficult. Push yourself if possible to connect. It could be a FaceTime call with someone. It could be a Zoom session like this, whatever it is. And then again, what I said before, connect to something greater, find something greater, whether that's being of service, asking yourself, how can I be of service? And like I said, this is a technique we use for depression and anxiety in general. Getting outside of our own selves and giving ourselves a sense of purpose. Like Morgan keeps saying, movement, exercise, also get fresh air. See if you can go out beyond the four walls. Of course, maintain proper social distancing, 6 feet apart. If you can, be with the trees, look up at the sky. And again, maintain your physical wellness. I think those are the things I would mention. And just to add that you're not alone. Many of us are going through this. You're not alone. I'm here, Morgan's here, and we see you, and you got this. And I know it's so hard. And I also know that it's going to be okay. So I'll post some, Psychology Today. I'll send Morgan or the Psychology Today website so that you can look up therapists if you need one and don't have one at this time. And I know a lot of them are taking new clients, especially now.
Yeah. I know my sister.
Again, be gentle, be gentle. Be gentle, be gentle, be gentle.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Morgan? Sorry, I cut you off.
No. My sister is also a trauma and attachment therapist, and
right.
Same thing. She's going online. She's taking more clients. It's just, yeah, they're expanding capacity. All right. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Jen, thank you.
Yes.
This was really beautiful. I'm so glad I got to connect with you, and I'm so glad all of you stayed on for this seminar. Jen, if people want to follow up with you directly, can you just say a little bit, excuse me, about how they can do that?
Of course. I'm at Brain Curves on social media platforms, BRAIN Curves, CURVES. And my email me directly, Jennifer Wolkin, PhD @gmail.com. And you know what? I'm going to throw out my cell phone number. I can't do therapy in text form, but if you just want a short, it's going to be okay. And I got you. I'm here for that. It's 516-603-1846. And if there's a call for a follow-up with us, I'm happy to jump on and actually get into the techniques, the grounding technique, the breathwork technique with you. So just let me know.
Well, that's great. Everyone, we're shooting to do one of these a day. Tomorrow we're going to be on with Julie Hunt, who is a meditation teacher. Wednesday we'll be on with Jeff Carrera, who is also a spiritual teacher and meditation teacher. They're really wonderful, but I'm just pushing the curve out a little bit. I've got the next 2 days scheduled, but we'll probably have some on Thursday and Friday, but we will probably circle back. And if Jen's open to that, I think that would be lovely. And we can get even more granular and just focus on some of these techniques. So great. Everyone, thank you again. Jen, thank you. Did you want to say?
So much. Just thank you so much for showing up. And this is part of taking care of yourself during this time, this very thing, showing up and being in community. And, like I said before, we're all experiencing this. We're all together. No one's impervious to this anxiety, not even a therapist. And, again, be gentle, be gentle, be gentle. Thank you so much. Thank you, Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Lots of love, everybody.
Yeah, lots of love.
Lots of love. Bye.